look at those snappers, will ya? I'm Liam, this is Rob, and welcome to the Here You Guys podcast. This week, we look back at a movie that felt like it was on TV every week when I was a kid, but one that, for whatever reason, really isn't talked about anymore, which is a shame because Robert Zemeckis' 1984 romantic adventure, Romancing the Stone, remains an absolute treat of a movie. Thanks to its fantastic on-location direction, brilliant Alan Silvestri score, wonderfully joyous sense of fun, but above all else, because of the undeniable chemistry of its two leads. This might well be a Michael Douglas production, and he's undoubtedly great as the charmingly opportunistic exotic bird smuggler, Jack T. Colton. But make no mistake, this is Kathleen Turner's movie through and through. Oh, and I guess Danny DeVito is pretty good in this too. But first, I've got to ask, is Jack T. Colton, Michael Douglas' character, is he an exotic bird smuggler? Or is he a soldier of fortune, as they state on the poster? Because if he is a soldier of fortune, he's not a very good one.
No, he's a bird smuggler. He says about his birds. It took a year and a half for him to get the birds. And he can't be a soldier of fortune. He did it all for $375 in American Express traveler's check.
That's a good point. I mean, it's weird. I can only assume that on the poster, because it's literally the tagline, they refer to him as a soldier of fortune. I was like, he's not a soldier of fortune. I think it's because literally somebody read the script and went, an exotic bird smuggler. We cannot put that on the poster.
He's a soldier of opportunity, not a soldier of fortune.
That's a good point.
It's really interesting what you just, because I've never seen this film.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen Jewel of the Nile. I've never seen this one. And what you said then about everything, about how it still holds up and has chat, and that's definitely nostalgia, because this film is ass.
Are you serious?
It is, mate. Honestly, I was so bored. I was bored, dude.
I think it's a fantastic movie. I to the point where I went out and watched, rather than Jewel of the Nile, which isn't as good as this film. It's just objectively
that
not as good.
I much prefer that. And I was speaking to Dave, who recorded with us last week. He prefers the sequel. I thought that was so much better.
It's a much weaker movie.
That's nostalgia for me, because I've seen Jewel of the Nile growing up.
Maybe. I mean, I've seen Jewel of the Nile as well. It is an interesting one because it's definitely one of these movies where a lot of people remember the sequel a lot more than the original one, despite the fact that I personally, and like the critics as well, like at the time, that was the reason we didn't get a third film, was despite the fact that Jewel of the Nile actually did pretty well at the box office, it wasn't as highly regarded as the original, which was something of a surprise hit, admittedly.
Yeah.
But
I can understand that. But for me, right, and this might be a hot take, I don't know, Michael Douglas is not a leading man. Michael Douglas is not an action star in my eyes. This whole film, and I know it's meant to be, and maybe that's why I didn't like it. This whole film feels like a trashy romance novel. And obviously it's meant to be a trashy romance novel.
Yeah, 100%. That's exactly what it's supposed to be.
Yeah. But it just, they fell into everything. The whole hunt for the stone, they was pointless. And why the stone was in a fucking statue, if this stone is meant to be years old, like they've made a map for it, why is it in a statue? It looks like they bought from a 1980s flea market. It's pointless as fuck. Like, there's no when you sold this to me, or when it's been sold to me, it's the hunt for this stone. So I'm expecting some good puzzle, some traps. They found it in a fucking cave. Anyone could have fallen onto that stone. It's absolutely pointless. They have no chemistry for me.
Oh, okay. Settle down.
No, there's no chemistry between them.
You are 1 for 3 at the moment.
Awful.
Oh my god.
The only thing this film gives us. The only film this film gives us is it ticks off a box for us in our Mary Ellen Trainor bingo. We've done another Mary Ellen Trainor film.
Well, yeah, because she's in like every movie of the 80s. And in fairness, this is one of the bigger parts. I will agree with you 100% about the adventure element. Now, they find the stone, and it's weird. It's like really nondescript. It's just found behind a bit of a whatever waterfall, which has admittedly been used in other movies. Like, this is supposed to be set in Colombia, this film, but for political reasons, they ended up shooting in Mexico. They were actually going to shoot in Colombia, but at the last minute, they're like, it's going to be too dangerous. We'll move this to Mexico. That waterfall, I think, was also used in Jurassic Park, but the adventure element is totally underbaked in this film. It never feels particularly important, and we'll get to the fact that I never really know why Danny DeVito's chasing them, considering the fact that they're trying to bring the stone back to his cousin, Ira. So Danny DeVito's entire role in this film feels kind of pointless in many respects. And them finding the stone, it does feel like they just kind of fall upon it in many respects. And there aren't actually many action set pieces in this film, for instance. But it's because I think wisely they put the emphasis on the romance and on the chemistry, which is unbelievable between Michael Douglas and Kathleen Turner. It's so good that they made 2 more movies together. The reason they made like War of the Roses, which again, I watched War of the Roses because of this. I enjoyed them together on screen so much that I skipped Jewel of the Nile because it's not very good. I know you prefer it. And went straight to War of the Roses just to see those 2 on screen together again. And spoiler alert, their chemistry is through the fucking roof in that
I don't
film.
think it is. I think I honestly I got so bored watching them. But I think that's because I don't see them as main attractions. I've never seen Michael Douglas as a main star, as an action star. I've never liked any of his films where he starred them, aside from Black Rain. But I remember liking Black Rain a bit better. Like I haven't seen that for years, so maybe I won't.
I really like Black Rain, but right, this is his run after this, because this is make no mistake, this was a star-making performance for both Kathleen Turner and Michael Douglas. I think we're stars to a certain extent, but the success of this film really did push them on. In particular, Michael Douglas, who you don't think is a movie star, he did obviously Romancing the Stone, Jewel in the Nile, Fatal Attraction, Wall Street, Black Rain, War of the Roses, Basic Instinct, and Falling Down, all almost back to back. He's not a movie star. You are out of your fucking mind.
Let's go back, right? So
yeah,
Fatal Attraction, shit, didn't like him. Wall Street, never watched it. Why do I want to watch people fucking talk about money all the time? Not for
this
me.
This feels like a personal thing rather than Fatal Attraction, one of the most, just the other side of that, Fatal Attraction, one of the most iconic movies of the 80s. Wall Street, possibly the most iconic movie of the 80s, but
they're not my typical. They're not my typical films. They're not films. As a kid growing up in the 80s, I loved the action side of it. I'm not going to watch what I think are boring looking films. So and then I go back and watch them and not a fan. So yeah, War of the Roses. Yeah, why do I want to watch people argue about divorce? I can see that through any house I grew up in St. Mellons at the time. So not for me. Basic Instinct, again, shit. Falling Down is fucking great. I forgot about Falling Down. I wish I hadn't. I think that film is fantastic. So yeah, I'll give you Falling Down.
Yeah, but you have to at least talk. I appreciate they're not your cup of tea, but you have to take a slightly objective opinion when you're throwing grenades like Michael Douglas isn't a movie star, when clearly in the 80s, he was one of the biggest movie stars in the world.
But from my point of view, he's not. And we're looking at this from my point. I can't be objective. I cannot be.
You have to. Person. Yeah. I can say like he's not your cup of tea, but this is how we end up with people talking about the world being flat. They mix up their opinion with objective truths.
But I don't do that. I just don't think he's a movie star.
No, he's not your cup of tea, but he is objectively and undeniably was a massive movie star.
He wasn't, though, was he? He didn't do big movies. He did fucking. I don't think they were big movies.
I think I just like every single one of those was a huge. Anyway, we'll move on. None
of those films are rated high on IMDb anyway. They're basically like 6.9 or 7. They need. Where's the 8s and the 9s if he's that great of a movie star?
I feel like all those films are pretty well remembered nowadays. But anyway, Kathleen Turner as well. I'm surprised that you're not. I don't know, after the Michael Douglas thing, perhaps I'm not. But I thought Kathleen Turner was so good in this. Like, I mean, she is. It's weird because I think for a lot of people, and it's a bit of a shame now that a whole generation consider her like they think of Chandler's dad. They think of Kathleen Turner as like playing her as Chandler's transgender dad, and it is interesting because she has a scene with Ross's mum in this early in the film, who's just apparently looked the same for like 30 years, kind of thing.
That's not Ross's mum. That's Charlie's mum from 2.5 Men. That's not Ross's mum.
I'm sure that was Ross's mum from.
No, dude, that's Holland Taylor. She played Charlie and Alan's mum in 2.5 Men.
Are you sure she doesn't also play?
No, different actor. No, different actor, dude.
That's a different actor. Oh, fair enough. My apologies. As soon as I saw it, I watched it with my wife. We were both convinced that was Ross and Monica's mum. Perhaps I'm not. My apologies. But anyway, I think a whole generation think of Kathleen Turner bizarrely as Chandler's dad, which is strange because she's only in Friends for a brief moment of time. But in the 80s,
for 1 or 2 episodes, isn't she?
Yeah. But she was like a proper sex symbol of the 80s. And I think she's like, I know, again, this is going to be a interesting conversation because you're not a fan, but I watch it and it's like she's sexy, charming, like she's clearly a hugely talented actress. And the important thing is like she's funny too, and she's great at the physical comedy. Like to me, it's like she reminds me a little bit of like the closest thing to her in terms of a modern day equivalent is Jennifer Lawrence to me. And she was, even though she maybe didn't have the hits that Jennifer Lawrence has, or is still having, I suppose, in the 80s, she was like this massive star, and then it just kind of drifted off. I think she had some health issues and stuff. And as I said, it's strange now that I think a lot of people kind of just think of her as this, that moment on Friends rather than this massive movie career she had in the 80s. But it seems to be largely forgotten by many, which is a bit of a shame because she has, if nothing else, one of cinema's great voices. That husky voice is absolutely unforgettable.
Her voice is fantastic. I mean, she's Jessica Rabbit, for Christ's sake, because of her voice.
Oh yeah, unbelievable. But the thing is, because of the voice and stuff, you immediately are. When I think of like Kathleen Turner in the 80s, I always think of her as being this kind of like sexy kind of character. But I thought she was brilliant as being like the wide-eyed character at the start of the film, almost like she doesn't know how to deal with the world. And then obviously the whole idea is that she becomes more, this transition into a capable woman, this badass by the end of the film to a certain extent.
I think probably because I'm now, and I love how we changed tact a little bit. And I'm 41. I'm getting old and grumpy. So when people are just whining or making silly mistakes in films, I can't tolerate her anymore. Mm-hmm. So all the stupidity that she does throughout the film just feels just like cringe to me. I know I said
but
cringe.
She has to have that to have like the transition to what she becomes at the end of the film. Like I remember at one point she lets her hair down and Beth is like, look how good her hair looks. It's ridiculous. It almost looks like it's being crimped or something. And I was like, yeah, but she literally has to let her hair down because it's literally representative of her journey in the film. She is literally and figuratively letting her hair down and kind of embracing the adventure. And if nothing else, this started...
I love how we look at films completely different. Like you did that then. Your wife said about that, and you said, no. Look, symmetry. Look at what it's given you. And I'm just thinking, fucking hell, wash your hair, love. Like it's totally different. Let's get a question before we move on. And it's completely. I'm not talking about any of the actors or anything. It was just something I noticed. Do you know when Elaine got knocked out by those her sister Elaine, Mary Ellen Trainor, when she got kidnapped, when she got knocked out by that kid? Who was just like, he's staring at her. How do you not notice a kid staring at you and swinging a pair of bolos for a start?
Yeah, it's a strange sequence at the start of the film, really odd.
But when he jumped in the car and stole the car, when he turned into Tattoo from Fantasy Island. Did you notice that?
What it reminded me of, I'm not sure if you've ever seen it, there's a famous, I think it's a Nike advert, or it might be Wheaties or something, but anyway, it's Michael Jordan and his mum. And they're playing basketball
when Michael Jordan's mum does the basketball, she becomes 7 foot tall, yeah.
Yeah, and she suddenly got a joke. It's just a dude. It's just a dude. They don't even like film from behind. It's just a side-on shot. And he's like, oh, that's my mum. I was like, no, that's fucking Steve from round the corner. Like, what the fuck? And there was an element, and we've talked about this on the podcast numerous times, that all these films were in standard definition back in the day. And you could get away with it to a certain extent, getting in stunt doubles and stuff like that. But now we're watching these films in like HD and all that jazz, and you can see every last pixel. So of course, when they bring in a stunt double, or there's just, I don't know, a grown man instead of a kid in the car, it stands out like a sore thumb. Yeah. The car was very cool, admittedly, but
the car was and the way that he drove it, I thought that was a great scene. Sorry. No, you go ahead.
No, it was just because I'm trying to get my head around the idea of, obviously, because you're not a fan of this film in the same way that I am. And I think it's just maybe approaching it in a certain way, because the second film certainly became more of a traditional adventure film. And again, that whole idea about when people think of these films, they think of the second film. And a big part of that is Danny DeVito is much more involved with both of them. In this film, he's having his own movie on the side. Like they have like 2 scenes where Kathleen Turner, Michael Douglas, and Danny DeVito were all on the screen together at the same time. And I think because like, if you're going back to this and almost like you see the poster and it looks like Uncharted, and I think a lot of people are like, oh, well, it's kind of like The Mummy or Indiana Jones. It's not actually anything like these films. In terms of tone, the closest thing I could think of to this movie is actually Crocodile Dundee. Only it's kind of the opposite. It's her put in a world where she's not suited to it. And obviously Crocodile Dundee is the other way around. Crocodile Dundee is another film where there's not that many action sequences. And really what it is it's a romance first and an action movie second.
Yeah, but for me, Crocodile Dundee does that right. but it doesn't, because they're promising something that they don't deliver on this. They're promising the adventure, and it's not an adventure. It's
it's a romantic. It's a
yeah,
romantic adventure rather than an adventure
yeah,
romance. If
but
that
it's a
makes
lot of
sense.
silly mistakes as well. There's no explanation of why Zolo is going way and above and beyond to try and get
Yeah.
this stone. Like, why is he going to New York to get this stone? Again, why is the stone on a map that looks like it was put on human skin from like the 1800s, but
Yeah.
it's stored again in a bloody statue that
Mhm.
was just give bought, like I said, from a flea market? That makes no sense to me. So that whole side plot of the stone was absolutely
Mhm.
stupid. The again, a cringe-worthy moment where the drug dealer reads her novels and is her best friend fucking angered me to shit. Like, I thought he
Oh,
was
with
great.
the scene with Juan and Little Mule, it is
Little
a
Mule.
bit of a
I,
strange one.
I thought he was good. Jack Colton is a great name, but what really
Oh,
pissed me off
fantastic name.
is when he turns around and says, "This guy is crazier than I am." You
Mhm.
haven't shown me anything on screen that makes me think you're crazy, Michael Douglas. You've done nothing. The only thing that makes me think you're a bit insane is you shot at Zolo with your
Mhm.
shotgun and missed every fucking shot.
Yeah,
Every shot at the beginning of that.
there is. It is weird. Like, is the shotgun even kind of viable as a long distance
No,
weapon? Like, he's just
it's not
shooting.
viable as a long distance. But
No, but
when
then
they're
he
both
misses every shot. Yeah, yeah,
but
too.
when they're close together,
Mhm.
one point he thought, you know what, I'm not going to shoot Zolo anymore. I'm just going to shoot every window on this bus. That pissed me off. It's ridiculous. You're using a scattergun, and
Mhm, mhm.
again, it's got no range or anything. But when he said this guy's crazy, right, you've shown me nothing to make you crazy. The only thing I think you're crazy is you think you
Mhm.
can buy a boat by selling exotic birds. Obviously, you're not
Yeah,
very
yeah.
good at that.
No,
So
it is weird because he's not actually all that fantastic at what he does. Like, he is a million miles from Indiana Jones. He never
yeah,
feels particularly capable. Like, once they start getting into trouble, they almost both feel as out of depth as each other, which I actually
yeah,
didn't mind. And as I said, a lot of this will, I understand totally if you don't buy into the chemistry, if you don't buy into the romance of their relationship, excuse me, then the rest of it falls down because it is pushed to the wayside. And I totally actually agree with you with the Zolo stuff. Manuel Ojeda plays Zolo. I never quite know what he's up to, why he's so important. They even say at one point, it's like, oh, he's a revolutionary, he's a cop, he's everything. And it's just an excuse for him to pop up. And even in the credits, like he's even though he's supposed to be the big bad guy, he's credited below Juan, who's
yeah.
and I
He's
looked.
credited six. Yeah,
Yeah, the reason for that is probably because Juan's played by Alfonso Arau, who's a very famous director in the 80s, had a huge career in Mexico, but also had a lot of big films in Hollywood as well. And it feels like one of those moments where they're like, oh, we've got Alfonso Arau in our film. We're just going to force him in there. And it
that's where
feels
I know him
it
from.
feels like almost there's a scene missing because they go to his compound and then all of a sudden he's helping them out and they drive out in his big truck. And I'm just like, why is he helping them? Where are
Yeah,
they going? It is
because
kind of confusing.
apparently he reads her book. Like, oh my god. Uh, that's where I know him from. Alfonso Arau.
Three Amigos.
He's El Guapo.
Yeah, El Guapo and Three
Yeah.
Amigos. So he is actually quite a big star, but he does feel like he's forced into this film. And again, it does the adventure side doesn't quite land. And to be honest, right, you're not the only one who did. Right, this was hugely popular with audiences. It did huge numbers at the box office. However, 20th Century Fox watched this film. They had an advance because it wasn't a 20. Was it Paramount? I can't remember. Whoever it was. 20th Century Fox watched an initial cut of this film, and they actually they were so convinced that this film was going to tank that they canned Zemeckis as the director of Cocoon because he was working on Cocoon at the time. But his last two films, his first two films had kind of bombed. So it was I Want to Hold Your Hand, the Beatles film, and Used Cars. Those films hadn't done well at the box office, and they went to see this, and they were like, "This is going to bomb as well. We can't have him directing Cocoon." So they ended up giving Cocoon to Ron Howard instead. But of course, when this film came out and it was such a big hit, 20th Century Fox went, fuck, we've got to get Robert Zemeckis back in the door. And how did they do that? They gave him Back to the Future. So this film is directly responsible for Back to the Future in many respects. Because if it wasn't for the success of this film, he would have never directed it. And also, if 20th Century Fox hadn't felt the exact same way about this film that you did, he would have ended up directing Cocoon instead. So
And I totally appreciate that. I'm thankful that there's an audience for this film. It just
yeah.
isn't me. Now, unfortunately, I will admit this. I love films, as we know. This is why we do a movie podcast.
Mhm.
I should not be an executive because I would be the same as 20th Century Fox. I would watch a lot of these films and go, no, no, no,
Mhm,
no,
mhm.
no, no. Like
You're not seeing the potential.
no, I can't sometimes, a lot of times, I can't get out of my own way when looking at these
Mhm,
films. This is why, again, I love doing this because I really appreciate both sides of it. You
mhm,
always look at, if there's a film you don't like if I choose a film and you don't like it, you
mhm,
don't outright come out and say, oh, it's shit, and then just double down. You always turn around and say, oh, but I could see why they tried this, or I could see why they've
mhm,
chosen this, or the director did this, or the photography. Like you always find a silver lining. Whereas
mhm.
I will just look for turd and turd. I can't do it. Like,
I mean, I don't. The thing is, I don't actually particularly enjoy shitting on films. So even films
oh,
I
I do.
don't like, I don't get me wrong. There is a joy to shitting on films, and some of the actually some like from a critical perspective, some of the best reviews ever written are when it's very hard to write a truly enjoyable review about a film you adore. If you
Yeah,
hate a film, oh my God, language opens up unbelievably. But I mean, luckily, I actually really enjoyed this film, and our scores are going to be wildly different. But one of the more interesting aspects of this film was it was actually written by Diane Thomas. This was her first and only script. She sadly died in a car crash just before the
yeah.
second film came out, and she was actually working with Steven Spielberg on his next film. So that's how much people love this film. Like she went straight from I think she was working in a diner. She wrote this. It was bought for a huge amount of money. The script. Obviously, this film went on to make big money. She was just about to work with Steven Spielberg, and then she died in a car crash with a boyfriend or husband. I can't remember which one it was, which is such a shame. And it's the other interesting aspect of that is when this film came out, a lot of people, of course, and it is the lazy approach because it's not the same, as you've already mentioned, it's not the same kind of film. People compared it to Indiana Jones, but this is just an Indiana Jones ripoff. Well, this predated Indiana Jones because it was written in 1979 and obviously took a while for it to be bought up.
Yeah.
So, but I don't even think that really matters because, as we've already mentioned, it's not really anything like Indiana Jones. It's much more like Crocodile Dundee.
Yeah.
And what it really is I'm not sure if it's the very first example, but it's the first example I'm aware of the whole author in their own story kind of subgenre. So there was Argylle last year, or was it earlier this year? Earlier this year. And what was it? The Lost City with Sandra Bullock. Right, both of those films not very good.
The Lost City I haven't seen, but the Lost City, the trailer feels like an extension of this film, Romance in the Stone.
Yeah, it's just not a good version of it. That's all.
Oh, I haven't seen it, so maybe I like that better than this. I'm not too sure.
You probably would.
Yeah,
it definitely leans more into the action, but it's just nowhere near as good as this.
I can't get on with the title either. Romancing the Stone. Why are they trying to fuck a stone? Why are they trying to like the whole stone thing? I know it's a MacGuffin. I appreciate that. It's bringing everyone into that. Ira and Danny DeVito have nothing to do. There's some sort of antiquities dealers who do things on the side. Danny DeVito says, "We've got enough." No, we need some more. So Ira, it just, I don't know. It's used to have the crocodiles at the end of it. That's the only reason you've got these two characters in there. Ira loving crocodiles. It's used to bring them all back to the end. And I always felt it was lazy. And bless her, I've got nothing against the poor lady you said who wrote this and died. Diane Thomas. I think there was more for this. There could have been more for it. What's interesting as well is she wrote the screenplay. You said Mary Ellen Trainor was actually one of the writers of
really?
Of this. Yeah, so she was one of the writers, and then she actually
maybe that's why she had a slightly bigger role than she always.
Well,
she always
Elaine
makes an impact.
this is her first role. This is Mary. So Mary Ellen Trainor was a writer before. This is her first role.
Oh, I see.
And then she goes on to do all these bit parts in all the other films.
She's got like the weirdest IMDb because she obviously like she's to my knowledge, certainly in the bigger films of the 80s, she never played more than a kind of small character role. However, if you look at the movie she's in, if you didn't know if she was in it for 5 minutes or if she was the star, for instance, and you just look purely at IMDb in the movie she's in, she might have the most impressive IMDb of the 80s. Yeah. It would, without question, be in the conversation. It's fucking real.
We are nearly finishing, like I said, Mary Ellen Trainor bingo. So, well, she had one episode stint in Cheers, but first movie roles, Romancing the Stone. Then The Stone Boy, not too sure what that was. The Goonies,
Yep.
Lethal Weapon, The Monster Squad, Action
Awesome.
Jackson.
Fucking hell. I didn't know
Yeah,
she was even in that.
yeah. Die Hard, Scrooged, Ghostbusters 2, Lethal Weapon 2, Back to the Future Part 2, The Outsiders. Oh, that's the TV show based on the film. She's been fucking Ricochet.
I mean, she
That film.
might. She's like the Hey You Guys actress. Like, if you like,
Yeah,
we've done all those films. We've done. It's
yeah.
just unbelievable.
Cuffs, Lethal Weapon 3, Death Becomes Her, Forrest Gump, Little Giants, Congo, Executive Decision, Lethal Weapon 4. Like, fucking hell. We
Yeah,
got to
she's
finish
been.
off her IMDb. We
Yeah,
have to.
well, I don't know. Do we really have to Congo? I'm not sure if we want to do that film, man. That film is
You made me watch
rough.
this. You made me watch this. You're watching Congo.
Dude, you're out of your mind if you think Congo is a better movie than this. You are
I
out
don't think I
of
don't think
your
it's a better
mind.
movie. But retrospectively, if I feel this is a piece of shit, I'm making you watch a piece of. Actually, no, I'm saving that for Garbage Pail Kids.
Oh, see, it feels mean-spirited. This is your problem. The world agrees with me. This is a good film. This is your problem, not mine. You can't make me watch the Garbage Pail Kids because you don't like good films. You fucking psycho. But,
No, yeah, I totally agree with you. The world is on your side on this one. You put this on our socials. A lot of people on Instagram remember this film fondly. I
yeah,
couldn't find many people. I might have to put a poll up. I couldn't find many people that said, well, I didn't find anything when I was looking that said that
the
this
thing
film
is,
was.
right,
Yeah,
I
so
think, right, make no mistake, I think you're out of your fucking mind. However, you're coming at this film in a completely different way because you're not buying into the chemistry and you're expecting an adventure film. I will throw you a bone and absolutely agree with you on pretty much everything you say from a narrative perspective and in terms of action, because the action set pieces are not very good and the narrative doesn't make any sense. And to bring it back to your point, the whole MacGuffin, the whole El Corazon thing, it doesn't make any sense. It's totally underwhelming. The whole waterfall thing we've already talked about. The fact that the stone looks oddly CG, it just doesn't look very good. I've already mentioned, as much as I love Danny DeVito, and I even quite like him in this, his whole involvement is completely pointless. Like you said, like I don't mind the idea of him and his cousin having this like side business because you're adding extra parties and you can have that showdown at the end and it almost becomes a farce. I don't mind that. But you had to make an excuse for Danny DeVito still chasing the stone. It just, as far as I can tell, it didn't exist. They were, as far as he knew, they were getting the stone to bring back to his cousin. Why was he trying to steal it? It didn't make any sense. The Zolo stuff, it's pushed to the background. The Juan stuff, it's kind of fun, but does it make sense? No, not really. So this film does 100% have problems, and I absolutely agree with you. But again, the difference is I'm so into their chemistry, which I think is completely off the scale. And sorry,
I totally give you sorry. I totally give you. I 100% agree with you on what you're saying about you're in it for the chemistry. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, you've talked about 10% of that film, the chemistry. The rest of the 90% of this film that's being promised to us, you've literally said doesn't work. So basically,
right. I know, I totally get what you're saying. Like from a narrative perspective, but it's not 10% because in all those scenes, what's happening? They're on screen together, and that chemistry remains. So personally, I'm willing to forgive its narrative shortcomings because of the relationship between Jack and Joan, isn't it? Jack and Joan.
Yeah, Jack and Joan. Oh my God.
I know that didn't sound great when I said it, but because they're so electric on screen together, because and the brilliant thing is, I feel like you can totally buy into the relationship they're going to have. Like within 2 minutes of them being on screen, I totally buy into the fact that they're going to fall in love with each other. I also buy into the idea that a year later they might be married. But I also I'm completely convinced that 3 years later they would be divorced. And I honestly, because obviously there was Jewel in the Nile, there was supposed to be a third film. I think it was called The Crimson Eagle. You could almost turn The War of the Roses, which was actually directed by Danny DeVito, who's in it as well. You could have almost turned that into the third film. It'd be slightly depressing where they've been on their adventures and now they just fucking hate each other and they end up killing each other. That would be kind of cool. But I could totally see their relationship going that way, where they fall so hard in love with each other. And then like 2 years later, they just can't fucking stand. Once the adventure stops, and they're just living a bog standard life back in New York, they would just want to kill each other within like a year. I think.
And again, that's why I couldn't buy into it, because it's basically it's it's the honeymoon period, isn't it? It's the holiday romance.
It's the speed thing,
it's the holiday romance and things like that. And for me, it's Yeah, it was just something that's probably because I'm just a cynical bastard. And
Might be.
I'm not going to deny that. I am 100% a cynical twat.
So
But
did you prefer, I can imagine then you probably preferred the end because the end is maybe the most traditional, like in terms of the film that they're quote unquote selling at the
what
start.
you mean the credits? Yeah.
Well, like the bit when they go to the castle and stuff,
Yeah.
that's the closest I think this movie comes to the movie I think you probably had in your head when you get into it. And maybe it's closer to what the sequel was because suddenly you get a bit more action, you get a bit more hijinks, you get like the joke is Jack's trying to be the hero. The whole bit when he's climbing up the wall, I don't know how he's getting up that wall, by the way. And of course, by the time he gets up there, Kathleen Turner's already dealt with it because, she's gone on this quote unquote journey and stuff. Like it's actually my least favorite part of the film because I think tonally it doesn't fit in with the rest. I mean, for all the kind of shenanigans or whatever, like this film is surprisingly grounded. There's not too many moments where they're doing anything genuinely unrealistic. It's like they're just stuck in this place and they're just trying to survive. Basically, you get a few moments with like car chases and, as you said, the bit with the shotgun's a little bit bullshit. But for the most part, this is relatively grounded. And then you suddenly get to that sequence at the end, and Jack's like holding a crocodile by its tail. And by the way, I have to ask, are we supposed to believe that after Joan kills Zolo, Jack, dives into the sea, wrestles a crocodile, kills him, removes the stone, and turns him into Boots? Is that what happened at the end?
No. So I take it for literal about what he said when he showed his crocodile boots at the end, right?
Mm-hmm.
Basically, Jack's so inept, he was planning to do all that, but the crocodile did just die of indigestion, choked on the massive fucking emerald that was in his stomach.
Oh, I see. So he's just kind of dragged a dead crocodile back to land. He's
dragged a dead crocodile, and now the story is,
as you said. That.
Yeah, but I think I'm taking it quite literal when he says that he had a bad case of literally that crocodile choked to death is what I'm assuming happened. He dove in and he's all prepared for some sort of fight where he's definitely going to die. Mm-hmm. And he goes, "Oh, look, there's a dead crocodile by there. I wonder if that's the one that's got the hand that's holding the emerald in."
Surprisingly violent moment as well in a film which doesn't really have any blood, doesn't have a huge amount of violence. Then all of a sudden, Zolo gets his hand bitten off. And let's be clear, a crocodile is not biting somebody's hand off.
Yeah, I hated that jump cut as well. Mm-hmm. Yeah, sorry, hand wouldn't come clean off. If the force of the crocodile, he's pulling the arm off at some point.
Well, he would drag him into the water. I think, yeah.
The jump cut when she throws the knife at him and he catches it in the plank of wood was so clumsy and so awful.
That bit doesn't look great. And the whole bit when Zolo's got the knife over it, it goes on too long because I'm just like, he would just be able to stab her. He has his weight on her. It's got to
give him enough time for Jack to scale that wall somehow.
Yeah, and he just doesn't. The thing is, the movie's relatively forward-thinking in that regard. Like, he's trying to be the hero, but she saves herself. I get that. It's just not shot particularly well. And I guess it comes back to that argument that it's a much better romantic film than it is an adventure film. It's not the second film's probably a better adventure film, but it's just not as well written. I just don't think the chemistry's there to the same extent. But yeah, I mean, it's strange. Of all the things to take me out of the film, rather than it being the action sequences, it was very much Jack's outfit when they went to like the little town. I was going to say Mexico, shot in Mexico, in Colombia, when he suddenly shows up and he's wearing all white. I'm like, God damn, Jack, you're going for it, buddy.
That whole let's dance thing. I hate those kind of moments. You're on the run from something. You've got enough time to stop and have a dance, and this is where we fall in love. Like, again, cynical.
Yes, apparently so. I mean, you must have loved some of the 80s nods because obviously once they go to Colombia, it kind of levels things out. So it almost becomes a bit more timeless. There aren't so many references. But when they're in New York, they go for like Tab Cola is just sitting around. It was almost like, like when they make movies now, like Stranger Things or TV shows, when like this is in the 80s, and then in the background, there'll just be a lot of things, posters, whatever, which says, oh, look, it's the 80s. This film has that. The only difference was it's like there's Tab Cola, there's noodle in boxes, which I just associate completely with movies. I always think of the first Ghostbusters film when they're sitting around having noodles and they come in those boxes. Maybe it's a New York thing because I've never seen them anywhere else.
You know about the Chinese?
Yeah. That's a I've always wanted
Chinese in those cartons when they come out in the
100%.
other, and we get them in the polystyrene or the metal trays or anything.
I don't know what it is about that. It was like we went out for my wife and I went out for a meal on Friday night after work, and it was this like American diner place, and I ordered a milkshake, and I was so happy when it showed up because it was in one of those metal cups, the big huge ones.
So
and
they've used the proper blender.
Yeah, and you don't get them over here. And what it screams to me is just like, oh, this is pure Americana. And of course, it might not make any difference in terms of taste, but aesthetically, I'm just like, I'm pleased as soon as it shows up. And your point exactly, if I got a Chinese takeaway and the noodles came in that box, they immediately taste like 10% better. Just because they look fucking cool.
I have had noodles in that box. It's like from those noodle to go places like Walk In, Walk Out or something like that. But again, it kind of takes you off because although, you get the plastic box and you've got the nostalgia, my box is orange. And I really want the white kind of box that 100%. Just has the weird Chinese character on it. Probably means nothing. You know?
And we don't care. It just has to be the white box. You're absolutely right. If it comes and it's got all white in and it's black or orange or whatever, I'm like, this isn't. It just has to be white. That's it. Just be fucking white. And what's the other thing they reference a bunch of times? Are Xerox machines. Xerox machines get mentioned like 17 fucking times.
That went nowhere as well, doesn't it?
It didn't go anywhere.
He was asking Xerox machines everywhere. He asked the drug dealer if they had a Xerox machine. He said, oh yeah, but it's broken. Then he asked the other guy who speaks perfect English. He says, yeah, we go on. Will it take a map size? Yeah, it's full size. It's fine. And then you've got that little thing where he hid it under the bed and then they're kissing. He clumsily tries to get it back out and put it back in a purse. Mm-hmm. If there was a guy or a lady on top of me and their hand is fidgeting down the back side of the mattress, I'd instantly go, what are you doing?
I mean, it did look like he might have been inside her at the time, so perhaps she wasn't paying attention. And it is strange to say suddenly, like mid-coitus, wait, what are you doing over there, kind of thing. But I like the fact, at least in those sequences, and it goes right through to the end when, after they kill Zolo and he jumps off after the crocodile, that he never becomes like the traditional hero. He's still a bit of a shitebag, which leans into the whole idea that they would 100% get divorced at the end of the film. And this is kind of completely by the by, but we mentioned the like tab cola and neon boxes. Nothing is a sign of affluence. Like there are like without like the show don't tell. How do we know that Joan is rich? I mean, yes, she lives in New York and she's a writer. As soon as she gives an entire tin of tuna to her cat, I'm like, oh, she's rich as fuck. We've got cats. I'm not giving a whole tin of tuna to my cats. They'll get a taste for it. Next thing you know, I'm broke because of those little bastards. But is this the first movie which used the weed kind of campfire thing? Because it's quite a cool idea. And again, if I was going to fall on your side of the fence, I would argue it doesn't really go anywhere, sadly. I mean, again, there's a great bit of physical comedy when she kind of falls on her face. But I'm not sure if I've ever seen a film where they sit around a campfire and they're forced to burn weed, which was really cool. And I was just like, has this ever been done in a movie? Like before or since? I don't think so.
Getting a contact high and stuff like that. That's great. But it's like, as well, now in 2024, smuggling weed doesn't seem like that big of a deal.
Also, you think he's supposed to be opportunistic. Like, I love that sequence. And again, I mentioned a few times the fact that this film benefits massively from being shot on location. I know it's Mexico instead of, Colombia, but it's not shot on set. It looks gorgeous, this film, for the most part. And that sequence in particular, because it was bizarre, and I've not really mentioned it because you haven't seen this film before. I watched this film loads when I was younger. And for some reason or another, it just dropped the fuck out of my head, which maybe just kind of support your argument more than my own. The only bit I could remember was the bit when they slid down the hill. And maybe it's because it looked violent as fuck. Like they looked like they were sliding down that fucking hill. But there's also the next bit, before they actually burn the weed, there is a plane in the middle of the jungle, which reminds me really specifically of the first Uncharted game in particular. Yeah. And I was like, is that just a plane in the jungle? Because it looks so fucking legit. And obviously there's no CG. They would have had to get a plane, put it in the jungle. So I assume there was just a fucking plane in the jungle. Like
they found one and just put it in. You're right. Two things you mentioned then. The first one, opportunistic. Yeah, you think he would have bagged a couple of kilos of weed.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. I mean, and then secondly, that slide down where you said it felt, and the whole thing felt Uncharted, randomly, and spoiler for my video game section, I'm playing I wanted to say the remake of the Tomb Raider. I've run through my Uncharted now, so I've remake. I say new, even though the first one was 2013, so that's 11 years ago. But the violent slide of it feels like because a lot of times within Tomb Raider, when she's sliding down hills and stuff, and if you don't move the right way, all of a sudden there's a spike through her neck, which is very graphic.
Oh, the first Tomb Raider remake
Yeah,
kind of thing. Yeah. I
yeah.
love that game. Love that game.
Yeah, so that kind of felt like that to me.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really, and then the whole jungle thing, and then you've got a plane in the middle of the, yeah,
Well,
it
it's
felt
just nowadays, if you had a scene like that and you had the movie stars, they would film them either on set, it'd be a combination of CG, or they'd be in like a warehouse in LA, and it just wouldn't look the same. It's just like, well, that just looks like people dangerously sliding down the side of a fucking hill. And those bits like still totally hold up. And as I said, beyond the fact, the very 80s things going on in New York, once they get out to Mexico, what I love is, and this is a whole separate conversation, is just a lack of mobile phones and what it was like to travel back. And this, like I say, back in the 80s, like when I first started going traveling, we didn't have a mobile phone. I had all the maps printed off on paper, and you just had to kind of like just get by. And mobile phones, and I was talking about a separate conversation, like ruin these films. They fucking ruin. Like every single film should be set in 1984. Like I love the idea that back in the 80s, if this was a quote unquote third world country, they could really represent it as a piece of shit country. Like she goes there, and it's just immediately it looks dangerous, it looks gross. Like nowadays, you're just not going to get away with that. But the idea that she would go there and really not know what she's doing, it was just, completely. You didn't have a mobile phone. There was nothing to rely on. If you didn't take a map with you, you just kind of get on a bus and be like, well, I hope this is going the right way. I've done it myself. We were in Korea, and I got on a bus, and we're going, I was just like, I don't know where the fuck we're going. And I tried in like really broken Korean to ask the guy, it's like, is this going to this place? And he's like, no. We just had to get off the bus in the middle of fuck knows where. Luckily we're in Korea rather than Colombia, of course. But yeah, sorry, that's my whole moaning about like mobile phones just ruining fucking movies, sadly. But what can you do?
Mobile phones are ruining the generation, dude. They're ruining this generation.
I
will agree with Joe Pesci and Lethal Weapon 4. They fuck you. They fuck you.
They do fuck you. All right, one last thing before we move on to favorite scene. You mentioned you also noticed the credits with Juan getting like credited ahead of Zolo, for instance. Did you notice Hefty Woman was the actress's name was just down as Chichita? So he just had Chichita as Hefty Woman. I was like,
I know it's like
IMDb.
IMDb.
Oh,
fuck me.
Yeah. That is a sentence. Fair play.
Chichita. So her name is Evita Munoz, but then in commas Chichita. So I think she is known as
her name even in the credits, because it didn't have the rest of the name. It just had Chichita in commas. It was just like, oh, this is Chichita.
I'm guessing she's a massive thing in like Mexico.
I feel like we've missed the boat with the whole Chichita thing.
So she was the one that beat the shit out of Danny DeVito, wasn't she?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Anyway, should we move on to favorite scene?
Yeah.
Cool.
You go first.
Well, for me, and it's either the aforementioned cliff slide, because that's the scene I always really remember. And in fairness, it does sell you on a film which maybe doesn't come to pass, because that's maybe when the film's at its most traditionally adventurous. When I know you had issues with the whole shotgun thing, but they have the shootout with Zolo, the kind of the vine thing, which is used on the poster, where they like swing over to the other side of the mountain and then they slide down, blah, blah, blah. I also kind of like the last shot where he shows up with the boat. As ridiculous as it is, and again, it comes back to the old man shouting at clouds. It's like when you go and see the new Ghostbusters film, for instance, one of the big issues is, for the most part, it doesn't feel like a New York film, because it's not shot in New York. It's clearly shot on a set, and you can feel it. In that last scene when he shows up with the boat, as ridiculous and absurd a romantic gesture as is, when the credits are rolling and you've just got that giant boat rolling down fucking, I don't know, 24th and 8th or whatever in fucking New York City, you're like, that is a boat going down the street in New York. And it just looks great. And it just reminds me of a different time. The reason why the first Ghostbusters still looks so great, because you're like, this feels like a New York movie, because it's actually fucking shot in New York, and you just don't get it much anymore. So that's more me complaining about the state of modern movies. So I'll go with the cliff slide. That'll be my shot.
I like the last scene. That's my favorite scene as well, but for a little bit different reason. So I love that when he shows up with the boat, right? Mm-hmm. And it's so idiotic that he's shown up with this boat in New York to, like, it's a gesture. Look, I'm back. I found the emerald. Mm-hmm. The emerald you helped me find, but I sold it. Mm-hmm. I bought a boat. Join me on my boat with the emerald you helped me find that you don't get a cut off. Like,
I think the idea is that they're going to share their life together, and she doesn't need it. She's got the book out of it. She's doing like she's living in
no,
central New
he's
York.
literally
She's
turned
doing
around and
fine.
said, "You helped me find all this. It was your idea for me to smash the stupid 1980s statue with the early 1800s diamond inside, because you wrote it in a book once. So I don't know, was like Nostradamus the guy that fucking hid this?
Yeah. I don't mind that. It's almost like a little bit meta, but they don't lean into it enough because I don't know, maybe it was
But
just
I did like that, but I just thought it was just so stupid where he's like, yeah, I didn't bring the emerald to you. Oh, and by the way, I've got this really elaborate necklace that I've bought you when it's in my hand, but when you hold it, it's basically just a locket because they must
that's
have.
weird, right?
Yeah.
What is going on with that sequence? He was holding this amazing necklace and then she has it in her hand. I'm just like, that looks like one of those ones you buy from Argos.
Yes.
Like 8-carat gold or
The
something.
same
Really
flea
strange.
market where they bought the fucking statue.
Yeah, it feels like it was like a sleight of hand moment. I assume that's just a blooper or something.
It is definitely they lost
Has
that.
to be a blooper.
They lost that necklace between cuts, and they were like, "Oh, you know what? Nobody will notice."
We noticed. Jesus Christ. I mean, admittedly, 40 years later. In terms of loves, for me, number one, without question, the chemistry between Douglas and Turner, which, as already said, off the scale. It's a shame there wasn't a third film, but at least there was War of the Roses. They're great together, even when they hate each other. It's fantastic. Number two, the on-location direction. I think this film largely looks absolutely fantastic. And Robert Zemeckis, you know, he's a pretty decent director, it turns out.
He really is. I agree with you on that.
And number three, and obviously this is where we like largely differ in terms of our opinions of film. I think the tone is perfectly pitched. I like the fact that it feels more like a Crocodile Dundee, that it feels less like an adventure film. And maybe because I grew up with it, I've always accepted it as such. Or I didn't, and I get it. If you see the poster and you know you're expecting Indiana Jones, you're expecting Uncharted. It's not that. It's not that at all in many respects. But as like a romantic adventure, I think it's absolutely fantastic. And as I said, like the comedy, the level of action, it never goes overboard. I thought it was brilliant.
Yeah,
this is going to be interesting for you. What's your one love?
Well, I got three. It was a struggle, but I got three. So the look of the jungle,
Yeah,
like you said, I think it's great. Where it's shot on location, I think it looks absolutely fantastic. It does look like it could be dangerous. You know, you've got the rainy weather, the sun, things like that, the mudslides. I think the plane just in the jungle because it crashed down, so it's just left there. You know, I think
it's a shame.
Yeah.
To your point, it's a shame almost that the film is never quite as good looking as those opening shots in the jungle. Like when they go down the hill, they have the shootouts, and as you said, the plane and stuff. Like it looks absolutely gorgeous. The rest of it is a touch more generic, which is a bit of a shame. But hey ho.
Yep. Jack's original like Jungle Man, every like look I thought was great.
Yeah.
So like, and then as he goes through, then his costume changes and all were just a bit, not the same for me. Mm-hmm. That was the struggle when I was trying to think of a third love. Mm-hmm. But my first love, and I've gone backwards on this one. So the first thing I wrote down was the first shot of Jack on top of that hill. Mm-hmm. You know, when he does the shotgun, he does the slide down. Mm-hmm. I thought it looked fantastic because there's the promise of something that's never to come, of this action star, of this hero at the top of it. The way she looks at him as well, his face is in shadow like it was in the book when he was a cowboy. Thought it looked great, and then all of a sudden it just becomes so lackluster for the rest of the film.
Yeah, right. You do realize that that's the point.
Yeah,
like, that is legit.
No, I get it. I do get it because I'm promised a film that's not delivered, I'm not a fan of. So,
well, the whole film is literally based upon the idea of not delivering on that. Like, you know, that's where we have. And it's strange we've not mentioned the opening shot with, you know, like, do you need the boobs in this film? Like, even Kathleen Turner, like, you know, like. But certainly where they have like, I guess is a visual representation of the novel, isn't it? It's not a movie version. It's just her imagination of the shot. And you get the traditional hero showing up and it's obviously set as a Western and you have like the woman with the heaving breasts and, you know, the see-through top and stuff like that. And yeah, that is the promise you get. Like, I think it's so good. Like the idea that he shows up and he looks perfect. Like, oh, he's going to be this amazing hero. And he shows up and he's not very good. And he's a complete fucking asshole. It's like, I love all that stuff. I think it's fantastic.
I do. And I like the bumbling hero trope. I am a fan of that.
He's not even a bumbling hero. He's just an ass.
But in other films, for some, it might be the fact that I'll go again. Michael Douglas is not a leading man.
Oh, Rough, rough. In terms of hate, which is going to be much easier for you, I'm never quite sure why Danny DeVito is in the movie. I enjoy him in the movie, but I'm not sure why he's in the movie. Zolo, and some, you've already made these points. Zolo kind of comes and goes and never feels a genuine threat. Sadly, it's kind of force fed to you a little bit in that last shot at the castle, but I never really care about Zolo. And the MacGuffin reveal of El Corazon is, I've got slightly underwhelming. You may have actually convinced me going that way, that it is massively underwhelming. The stone thing, the waterfall, it doesn't look great. They just kind of fall upon it. The adventure element of this film doesn't quite hit the heights, sadly. And so, yeah, those are my hates.
You said it'd be interesting. You pretty much said everything that I had written down. You've nailed it. Like the hunt for the stone, the way they find the stone, it's all pointless. Mm-hmm. Danny DeVito and as Ralph and Zach Norman as Ira seem pointless. There's something more in between their relationship that just never comes about. Yeah. Zolo is absolutely pointless. He's a third character. He's a second villain that they don't need. Or he should have been the main villain. It should have been him kidnapping Elaine. It should have been him doing it all. Like, why he's just hunting around and you have these two Americans in there seems pointless to me.
Well, I think if they just made Zolo more of a threat,
Zolo the bigger threat.
I think it could have worked. Like, I get it on paper. Like I said, the whole kind of like, the idea that everyone's chasing them. Like, if you gave Danny DeVito and Ira a better reason, not a better reason, because they all want the stone, but it was written into the narrative in a more successful way. I don't mind that idea. I like the idea that they're coming from one side, Zolo's coming from the other. They're caught in the middle. I don't mind that. It just never quite comes together, sadly.
And we know it's left to the imagination, right? That it's Zolo that kills Elaine's husband, chops him up into little pieces or whatever. But it's never actually explained. There's no explanation of what the husband was doing. Like, is the husband the adventure guy? Was he the one looking for El Corazon? Yeah. Or did he just stumble upon this map and then get chopped up into tiny pieces?
I think that's it. But yeah, it kind of comes and goes. It's like at the start of the film. It feels more of an excuse just to get Kathleen Turner to Colombia, but that whole side of the story is a great point. It's kind of like, wait, what was the guy doing? Why with the map? Why Zolo? There's just too many. Yeah, if you start thinking about basically, let's be clear, the core narrative of the film, it doesn't necessarily all make sense. I think so. There are problems there.
Next, next second.
So alternative titles, which, and I didn't actually respond to when you said it earlier, Romancing the Stone. Supposedly it is an actual term used in jewel making, Romancing the Stone. Okay. However, to your point, it does sound a little bit like you were trying to fuck a jewel. There's no getting around it. I'm not the biggest fan of the title of this film, Romancing the Stone, either. And I also don't like, and this is a weird criticism, the font. If you look at the poster, the font is kind of like, this film's 1984. It almost looks more 1992. It's quite an ugly font. And yeah, the title is, you can see why some people are like, Romancing the Stone. What the fuck does that even mean? I still don't really know. So I can only assume that there is certainly potential here for better titles.
Yeah, no, they're all terrible. But
oh shit, never mind.
Right,
I really built that up with confidence. I was like, no, Venezuela will come. They'll deliver the goal. No, they're all shit. Never mind.
Argentina after the Lost Emerald.
Ah, it's terrible. Bollocks.
Austria on the hunt for the Green Diamond.
Oh no, so on the nose.
Belgium in pursuit of the Green Diamond.
All they've done is they've looked at Romancing the Stone and said, this is a little bit too obscure, a little bit too obtuse. So we're going to go right the other way and make it as literal as possible. Yeah.
Brazil, there has to be a Brazilian version of me, the guy watching this film and going, oh, what do we title this? Oh, yeah. All that for an emerald? All for an emerald.
All for an emerald. Yeah, that does sound a little bit defeatist. All for that emerald? Jesus Christ, this was a lot of work for an emerald.
Denmark. Now goes the wild treasure hunt.
No, long-winded, terrible. You were right. You're incredibly wrong about Michael Douglas and Kathleen Turner, but you were bang on about the quality of the alternative titles. I'll give you that.
Don't know what film Estonia watched. To the Rocky novel.
Oh, that feels like one of those, like if you put like words through a translator 17 times, that's what it comes out with.
Finland Green Diamond Hunt.
So on the nose.
Yeah. Oh, Italy. It's not an emerald. It's not a diamond. They're in pursuit of the green stone.
Oh, they are that is literally they are in pursuit of the Green Stone.
So Italy in pursuit of the Green Stone.
Yeah, these are bad. Fair play.
Lithuania, a novel with a gemstone.
Yeah, yeah. Kind of not buying it.
Ne- Netherlands, emerald hunting.
Very literal again. Incredibly so.
Poland, Poland might win just for love, emerald, and crocodile.
Oh yeah, let's go with that. Love Emerald and Crocodile. Let's end with Poland and love Emerald and Crocodile. I actually
Oh
quite
no, we're
enjoy
not
that one.
ending. We're still going, but there it
Oh,
is.
fair enough.
Spain, find the green heart.
No,
Sweden, the wild hunt for the stone.
no.
Taiwan just gave up. Emerald.
Emerald, fair enough. That is fucking lazy as shit in fairness.
Turkey, storm in the Amazon.
Nope.
Yep. And Venezuela coming out of the gate. Two rascals after the lost emerald.
Jesus Christ, that is horrendous. Two rascals.
Two rascals after the lost emerald.
I mean, some of these have to be a translation issue, but Jesus,
I know. Well, that's what we say when we do these, mind, isn't it?
I told you we should have stopped at I don't know. Should we have stopped at Poland? I mean, that one's so bad that it was worthy of mention. In fairness,
Yeah.
Jesus Christ. Any facts for this one?
Yeah, we got a couple off the bat. We've already said a few of them, like Robert Zemeckis getting fired, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Alan Silvestri was hired to do a temporary score for the film, but director Robert Zemeckis liked his work so much that he kept him on as the composer.
And they've literally worked together on every Zemeckis film since. I'm pretty sure Silvestri has scored every single one of his movies.
In the famous dance scene, Michael Douglas was not aware that he was being filmed. He was dancing with Kathleen Turner and some extras and was surprised to find Robert Zemeckis had been filming the entire time.
See, that's quite charming. I actually, for as terrible as his suit is, and it is appalling. I don't know why he went with that one. I do enjoy that whole sequence where they just have a dance. It's just a nice moment in the film.
Michael Douglas was intrigued by the script, despite some initial hesitation, but was ultimately won over by the opportunity to exhibit the rock climbing skills he'd honed as a teenager. When he was around 16 years old, Michael would enjoy rock climbing with his father during breaks in the filming of Spartacus, which was shot largely in Death Valley, California. So basically, the scene where we thought, how the fuck did he get up? That's the whole reason he took this film on.
It's just to have that. That almost feels a little bit Tom Cruise-esque, doesn't it? Where it's just like, I just want to do the rock climbing sequence. It's not quite the opening sequence of Mission Impossible 2, in fairness. He's not that insane. He's just a normal person who's done a little bit of rock climbing. He's not willing to potentially kill himself.
The Rolling Stone that Jack finds in the dead pilot's bag is the September 9th, 1982 edition, featuring Elvis Costello on the cover.
Oh, cool.
Sylvester Stallone turned down the role of Jack T. Colton in order to star in Rhinestone, the decision he deeply regretted. Oh my God.
Well, yeah, that is a terrible choice, and also not the film I want to see. I do not want to see the Sylvester. In fairness, the Sylvester Stallone version of this film might be closer to what you wanted, but I am so glad that it's Michael Douglas in this film. Jesus Christ, that would have been rough.
To be fair, I don't know if I would have wanted that because I couldn't see any chemistry there either.
Yeah, but I think it would have been more of an action film. Like, you know, like when has Sylvester Stallone ever had chemistry on screen?
I don't think so.
Like, you know, not in Cobra.
His Beverly Hills Cop rewrite, Cobra. Do you remember the chemistry with his actual nearly wife?
Oh, yeah. Well, that's what I mean. It just wouldn't have worked out, but it would have been a more traditional action film for sure.
Yeah. Right, a couple more from me then. So Clint Eastwood, Jack Nicholson, and Christopher Reeve turned down the role of Jack T. Colton. The only one I'm seeing possibly be a good Jack T. Colton was Christopher Reeve.
Christopher Reeve was the one that stood out for me as well. I could totally buy into that. And I think he would be good in that same kind of almost, and it would actually, because we mentioned briefly the old idea of this being slightly meta, but it's not leaned into in the same way. It's there for those who want to kind of look into it. But the idea that Superman rolls up, like, you know, literally she looks up and Superman's on the fucking hill. And of course, it's not just the fact that he was Superman. He looked the part, you know, he's 6'3", big, huge dude. And then he just shows up and he's just an asshole. If anything, that would work even better. I'm not trying to get rid of Douglas, because as I said, I think he's absolutely fantastic in this film, and I think their chemistry is brilliant. But in terms of the meta aspect, like, you literally couldn't have done better in 1984 than getting Superman to show up, only for him to be fucking useless. That would have been great.
Bob Hoskins turned down the role of Ralph. which eventually went to Danny DeVito. Hoskins and Robert Zemeckis would work together 4 years later in Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
That's another
Kathleen
film we've
Turner, who
got to
plays
do.
Joan, would also provide the voice of Jessica Rabbit. Did he just want a guy of a shorter stature to play?
Yeah. I think just kind of visually, I think that works. Like, you've got like the traditional hero, and then you've got like the shite bag, and he is fantastic at that. It's a weird one because I was watching, as I already mentioned, War of the Roses after this. And I've seen obviously 100 films with fucking Danny DeVito in. What you often get with Danny DeVito in the 80s, like if you watch Twins, for instance, same thing. He's often with beautiful women. And Danny DeVito is like 5'1". He's this little rotund fella. But for some odd reason, and I don't know how he's done it, it's always, I never question it. Like when he shows up with a beautiful woman, I'm just like, yeah. Why does that make sense? I don't know. There's something about Danny DeVito where if a 9 out of 10, 22-year-old blonde is just like, I've got a thing for Danny DeVito. You're just like, I get it. I don't know why I get it, but I just fucking do. It's strange.
Oh, dude, he has a charm. He definitely has a charm.
He totally has a charm.
So the last one for me, this was Michael Douglas's first action film. It's not a fucking action film.
It's kind of an action film.
It's not.
It is. He swings on a vine. He shoots a shotgun.
My God,
there's a car chase.
Fucking vine.
There's enough for it to be. It's not, like I said, it's romance action rather than action romance, but it's there. It's there and thereabouts.
Oh, sorry. One more. Paul Newman was offered the part of Jack Colton, but felt there was unnecessary and excessive violence in the movie. What fucking script did he read?
Maybe he just started at the end and moved backwards. He's read about the crocodile biting off Zolo's hand and it's gone from there. Because, it's not. And the thing is, you never know. This film on the page, you've got to remember, it depends who's directing it. You could turn this into a much more violent film. You already mentioned the fact that Sylvester Stallone was going to take this film. If you read this and you could almost imagine it being a relatively violent film if you wanted it to be. It's just Robert Zemeckis hasn't directed it in that way. He's turned it into a family-friendly film. But there is another version of this film, which is largely the same, which is just a bit more violent. So I get it, but... And I assume, I don't know, I in the research, it never came up whether Robert Zemeckis was always attached to direct or whether it changed, blah, blah, blah. But hey-ho. But that's another interesting, Paul Newman would have been pretty cool.
Yeah, Paul Newman from the 80s, I think.
How old would he be? He would have been quite a bit older, though, wouldn't he?
Because this was round about the time. So this was what, 84, you said?
84, yeah.
So
Paul
85, I think.
60. Surely.
85 or 86 was The Colour of Money, where he was a bit... Yeah.
I don't. Well, that's one of the things with Michael Douglas, though. I know you don't buy him as a leading man stuff. I will say, like, he's always looked like 52 years old. Like even in this film, I think he was like 39 or something. He looks 52, and it's a massive problem. So I've gone back to War of the Roses again. I'm not sure if you've seen that film, but there is a sequence at the start of the film where you're supposed to buy into the idea that it's like a flashback. Kathleen Turner and Michael Douglas are supposed to be like in their early 20s or late teens. Of course, they just don't have the CG for it. Kathleen Turner just about pulls it off. Michael Douglas, them trying to sell him as a 20-year-old is fucking laughable because he's just like, dude looks 57. It's ridiculous. Anyway, sorry, carry on.
That's it.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, that's it.
This is going to be, this is not going to be interesting. We know what your answer will be. Hug to the Future, remake sequel, Don't Touch or Let It Die. So I would have loved an additional sequel. As already mentioned, there was supposed to be a third film, The Crimson Eagle, which is almost strange that it didn't get made because I know it wasn't as well received critically, the sequel. It still did decent money, albeit maybe it's just one of those things. It wasn't as critically well received as the first. It didn't make quite as much money as the first. So they're just like, we'll just can it. I've already mentioned earlier, you could have almost turned The War of the Roses into a third film, albeit a very depressing one. Yeah. I would have loved to have seen a third film in the series. I don't want a remake because I think the reason this movie works is because of Kathleen Turner and Michael Douglas. So the third film didn't happen. Just leave it be. But I would, like I said, I would have loved to have seen a third film.
For me, I don't know. Did they remake it? Was that Lost City meant to be like the kind of remake that you were going to get?
No, they've done a whole bunch of films like this where the authors ends up in their own story. It's taken the concept, but it's not a remake by any stretch.
All right. So I think you could remake it but I wasn't enamored with this film. So I think you could give it another go and see what you get.
But that's what you end up with. Like, if you don't have that easy chemistry and the difference, say, like The Lost City, if we take The Lost City as an example, everything's more heightened. So nothing really lands. So I don't buy into the romance. I don't buy into the peril because it all suddenly feels Hollywood. The reason I think this fundamentally works is because it's grounded and it's at least slightly relatable. And I buy into this idea of her being a writer, getting caught up in this world and slowly becoming more and more adventurous, because it's not things exploding every 2 minutes. I can understand her almost learning to deal with this wild world going on around her. As soon as you get giant explosions, you're just watching another Hollywood film, and I don't think it works a la The Lost City, or whatever the fuck. Is it called The Lost City? It's something like that anyway, whatever the fuck it is. I don't give a shit. That's a film I don't like. I watched it on a plane. Terrible. Make a change. I mean, this could be, remember, you can only make one change, Rob. One change, that's all you can make.
Shall I go first then?
Go for it.
Yeah. So making a change for me is the story behind the emerald. Make the emerald a bigger part of it. Why are we hunting for this emerald? So then I would probably feel more for why the Ralph and Ira and Zolo or Zola, whatever, why they want it as well. Not just because it's worth money, but there's got to be some. For me, see, I kind of made it in my own mind. Zolo seems to be looking for this because it's probably got something like historical reference for him, kind of thing. Because why would he need the money when he's got his own army and things like that? And it seems
and the thing is, I could say the exact same thing if I was going to make a change. It was basically either that kind of strengthen that whole narrative, which the core of the film is around, like the finding of the stone. Why is everyone so interested? Like, and it's not just that. I could deal with the idea that they just want it for money, but Zolo's intentions are never particularly clear, as we already mentioned. Danny DeVito's, and that's what I've kind of basically chosen in the end, is the clarity of Danny DeVito's plan. It's like, why is he getting so involved when it doesn't really make sense? But that lends itself to the wider story with Zolo and everything else. So basically the same issue. In terms of video games, there wasn't a Romancing the Stone video game, and I was going to pick something a bit more adventurous, like an Indiana Jones. But as I said, this isn't that kind of film. So I've actually gone with a point-and-click adventure, a la Broken Sword, something along those lines.
Broken Sword, Monkey Island. Oh my god, you win.
Yeah, so that's what I'd go for, because to your point, this isn't really an adventure film. Like, I don't feel like there should be, action scene after action scene. The emphasis should be on the character interaction. So I'll go with point-and-click adventure, Broken Sword.
You win, because I would have just tried to make a better version of Romancing the Stone via a video game, kept the adventure hunting for the emerald, and had it a la, like I said, 2013's Tomb Raider by Square Enix. So I'm doing something that this film, that I believe is better than what this film delivered. But the way this film travels, definitely it's a fucking Broken Sword.
I think you have to be careful, because the thing is, if you end up turning this into a more video gamey movie, what you end up with is the Uncharted movie, which I know you were warm on. I thought that was absolute dog shit. I thought that was such a bad film, sadly. To the point where I love the video games. And I'm not beholden to the video games. We all agree it should have been made 10 years earlier with Nathan Fillion. That goes without saying. Yeah. But the problems go beyond the fact that I'm not a huge fan of Tom Holland. It's just not a very well-made film. Whereas this film, as I said, it benefits from being grounded and not being video gamey. So I think that makes sense. Scores and recommendations. Well, this is going to be, for me, unsurprisingly, 4 and yes. I think this film still totally holds up. I think the chemistry is great. I think the stuff on location is fantastic. There is some stuff at the start where you're like, well, you've got to get over that kind of hurdle of that is very 80s. But once they get to Colombia, or Mexico, as it actually was, for the most part, it still looks good. There's nothing there which kind of immediately ages it. I think it's on Disney Plus at the moment as well. Actually,
that's where I watched
going out and buying the DVD. But if you have Disney Plus, personally, I think this film is totally worth a watch. Whether you've never seen it before, whether like me, you've seen 20 years ago and it's just never been on TV since. But easy recommend for me.
Yeah. It's a 2. I think there's enough in it to not make it a 1, but it is a 2 for me. And no, I wouldn't.
Damning with faint praise. There's just enough there for it not to be a 1. I thought you were going to do a classic Rob 1.5.
But it's not a recommend for me. The only way I would but I was going to say, trying to save in grace, the only way I would recommend it is watch this so you understand what's going on for Jewel of the Nile. But I've never seen this, and I've watched Jewel of the Nile multiple times. Not for a long, long time, but I've seen that maybe 4 or 5 times, because it used to be on ITV a lot.
Yeah. And that's the one, if anything, that's the one that will still be on TV. And to bring it back to you, I think it is an easier watch, Jewel in the Nile, because the adventure side it's a bit more formulaic. And as I said, I never think it's as interesting a film as this one, but I get why people remember that film and why it's shown on TV more. I think this film, you actually have to pay attention a bit more. But it's one of those strange ones. But I don't think you actually need to watch this to watch Jude and I. You could probably just jump in. It kind of washes over you. It's a fun enough film.
Yeah,
so,
you don't need to know why Ralph is pissed off with them. He just screwed them over in the future. You got two people that are in love. They've had an adventure before. I'm good with it.
You don't need to watch, like, as obviously I would suggest that you do. But if you'd never seen Indiana Jones before and fucking The Last Crusade was on, I was like, you just watch The Last Crusade. You don't have to watch the other two. Watch them in whatever fucking, like, if anything, Temple of Doom is famously set before Raiders of the Lost Ark. Watch them in whatever, as long as it's the first three films. Don't start with Dial of Destiny, because that'll just put you off the rest of the films full fucking stop. But the first three films, you can totally watch them in any order, and it's the same here.
I've never watched The Jewel of the Nile and thought, you know what, I need to go back and watch Romancing the Stone. It's never felt like I've needed to. And like I said, this first time I've watched it, and to be fair, it'll probably be the last time. So
fair enough.
Yeah.
So your choice next week. What are you going for, sir?
Right, you ready? You got your quiz game hat on?
Oh God, I forgot about the quiz. No, I absolutely haven't, but go for it anyway.
Right. So 1989.
1980. Haven't we done every film in 1989?
I thought we did. And I'd be interested to know if you've seen this film.
Okay.
This film seems to be, like, I said to Dave, I'm doing this film, and he said, I've never heard of it, which, when I tell you the cast, is bonkers to me. But
Okay.
Yeah.
Give me the next clue.
Right. Starring Patrick Swayze.
It's not the one where he's in the truck, is it? There's a film.
No, that's Black Dog. That's 1990 with Meatloaf. I love Black Dog.
See, I wasn't a million miles off there. It was only a year off. 1989, Patrick Swayze.
No, 1990 something. I think it's like 1998 or something like that.
Oh, sorry. I was miles off then. 1989, Patrick Swayze. No, I'm not getting it.
All right, so I'll give you the tagline.
All right.
And then I'm going to go for a fourth, but because I just, before, if you don't get it from the tagline, before I tell you what the film is, I'm going to tell you more of the cast, right?
Okay, cool.
The tagline: a man murdered in cold blood, but they didn't count on his brother's revenge.
Is it a... Did he do another film with... No, I was going to say Sam Neill. It isn't Sam Neill. No, you have to give me...
Right, so the rest of the cast: Liam Neeson, Adam Baldwin, Helen Hunt, Bill Paxton, and Ben Stiller.
Fuck, is this the one where, like, Liam Neeson has, like, weird, like, mutton chops kind of thing? He's got, like, a weird facial hair thing going on.
Yeah.
Oh, I know the film. It does have an amazing cast, and I can see it for the rest of my life and not remember the name of the title. But I know exactly. For some reason, I looked it up quite recently because I had never heard of it. I was like, fucking Liam Neeson was in this, and I saw big Liam in the picture. I was like, wow, he is going for it in this film. And I'd never heard of it before, and for the life of me, I can't remember the title. But bizarrely, I was legitimately looking at this film like a month ago, and it's just the title's dropped out of my head.
So for everybody out in misery, I'm hoping people are screaming now when they're listening to this, but Next of Kin.
Nobody's screaming Next of Kin. Well, maybe there are some people, but that is a deep cut. And again, in a world where we haven't done twins, or, as we mentioned earlier, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, we're doing Next of fucking Kin.
Yeah. So basically, it's hillbillies versus mobsters.
Yeah. That was the vibe I got. So it's a distinct look for sure. But I don't even know. Like, is this film was it well received? I seem to recall that the reviews were pretty bang average. It's like 5 point something on IMDb.
It's 5.8. It's I remember enjoying it. I haven't seen it since the 90s, but I remember enjoying it. I remember having a good time with it.
I'm willing to give it a go because, as I said, I it was enough to it that I started looking into it. I forgot what the title was, but it was the look of Liam Neeson. It was like a set photo. I was like, what the fuck is
the mutton chops and the trucker's hat?
And I was like, is he playing like a hillbilly? And yeah, that's exactly what he was doing. So
Ben Stiller.
Yeah. It's a mad cast. So yeah, I'm actually quite looking forward to this one because I was looking. It was one of those films. I was just like, this feels like we might end up doing like the 289th episode. But no, we're pushing it forward to 161, I think it is. But we'll see. So yeah, this has been Romancing the Stone. Next week, another 1989 film, Next of Kin. Although it does feel we are scraping the barrel a little bit of 1989. Yeah, well, we're doing with Next of Kin.
Patrick Swayze had two in 89. It was this and Roadhouse.
Yeah, we've already done Roadhouse, obviously. And oh god, I watched the remake, but we'll talk about that another time. So anything else before we wrap this up?
No, mate, I'm good this weekend. This week, thanks.
This week, yeah, fair enough. Okay, I've been Liam, he's been Rob, and you have been listening to the Here You Goes podcast. Cheers, guys. Bye-bye.
Cheers, guys. Bye now.
Oh, and before I forget, where can folk reach us if they were so inclined to?
Well, you can actually reach us on Hey You Guys 80s at Facebook, Instagram, and on Twitter. But if you want to send us a mail, do heyyouguys80s@gmail.com. Send us in your recommendations. Send us in your thoughts about any of the episodes. Just literally talk to us. We'll have a one-sided talk with you on the podcast.
Yeah. We're nice folk. Get in touch. But no, cheers, guys. Bye-bye.
Cheers, guys. Bye now.
Hey, you guys!